who uses proper sentence structure and correct punctuation. Isn't it cool to be literate now? Write in the comments what you think about it. Enjoy the show. Story 1. As someone who used to be a kid, there always was something uncool about caring too much, putting in effort for certain things or doing things properly, and I wasn't rebellious at all or anything. I don't think I wore my backpack with both straps on even once between primary school and graduating uni, no matter how heavy it was. For some reason in my mind, I had to be seen as not caring about wearing it. Story 2. Texting has its own rules and etiquette that differ from formal communication. Example, okay is fine but okay, with a period, is read as aggressive, as if you're being sarcastic or giving attitude, sass. Example, is considered a sarcastic gesture to the younger generations. For older ones, the thumbs up emoji is sincere. Example, IMO is acceptable in casual conversation. Writing out, in my opinion, is considered aggressive and will immediately change the tone of the discussion. Perhaps your son is on the spectrum and is having difficulty picking up on hundreds of subtle differences between text and spoken or formal communication. Story 3. I think with the way fast communication is easily made, the informalness between friends, acquaintances, is highlighted through grammatical and punctuation mistakes, shortcuts in texts. So gradually, fully formed texts are only reserved for formal situations like emails. Even then, it's usually reserved for business/school if the teacher is harsh about that. Or, those shortcuts are fast. Though I think that your son's friend's teasing means no harm. I'd say he's considerate by taking the time to make sure his sentences are correct. Story 4. These days, intelligence is frowned upon. Science is to be totally ignored. Grammar is nothing more than a punching bag. Literacy is for suckers, and Democrats are evil baby-eating communists. That being said, I do that too. Full punctuation, proper grammar, no emojis or made-up nonsense words like riz, whatever that is. Pure text is a poor enough method of communication, so sending very clear messages with all the clues that help get meaning across is important to me. No one misunderstands my messages, because I don't leave question marks off of questions, shorten or misspell words, or use a bunch of vague pictograms whose meaning is open to interpretation. I haven't gotten any complaints about it, but I don't think anyone thinks it's a thing that is worth ripping on me for. Edit. I suppose I do use a few emojis, more like emoticons really, to clarify my tone when necessary, but none of that eggplant, volcano, water drops, peach etc. stuff. Story 5. First of all, the one paying the phone bill is the one who sets the rules. If you are a recipient of the result of someone else's labor, you are deemed submissive to the rules of the payee. As a father who pays his daughter's phone bills, I have explicit rules when it comes to our communication. If I call, she answers. If I text, you answer in complete and comprehensive sentences, including proper punctuation. I'm not an inherent asshole. I just believe in teaching my child the basics of communication. It's obvious how easily text can be skewed to carry a certain emotional weight that could be misconstrued. Story 6. Do you arrange every verbal statement that you make as perfectly grammatically correct, with pauses at commas and periods of exactly the right length and every aspect of your cadence, word choice, and pronunciation arranged perfectly? I doubt it. And if you tried, you'd come off as, at best, needlessly formal. I generally do the same thing you're describing here. In my case, it's a result of autistic traits, but I recognize that texts especially function less like formal writing and more like casual speech, and that my grammatical habits can appear stiff and formal, even rude. Story 7. In today's texting culture, people want to save time, so it has become a habit to use abbreviations and not use punctuation, and therefore makes it unusual when someone does. I wouldn't say it's uncool, but from my experience, it's the least popular people that do it. Don't get me wrong. If friends with a do people that use punctuation and they're very nice/cool people, it's just that usually they spend less time socializing with the masses, so didn't develop the habit to use abbreviations and ditch punctuation. Story 8. It's not about being literate. It's about using proper tone and language for the context of the conversation. Imagine if you go to have a coffee date, and your date speaks in nothing but formal language, like he's writing a paper or making a speech. It would be weird. That's essentially what your son is doing by writing everything out properly by text. If he doesn't like using slang or text abbreviations, maybe he can try using less punctuation and break his texts up into multiple texts. Story 9. A lot of people online are used to flamboyancy put into text through typos, emoticons, acronyms, or other means. It's how tone is provided when there would otherwise be no indicator using solely words. He's probably not actually being bullied, and isn't likely being looked down upon for it. It's just that in a circle of friends, speaking solely with direct wording and punctuation is the same as verbally speaking like a robot. It is almost disruptively monotone, which can be funny sometimes when a young boy is making the jokes a regular young boy makes. Story 10. It does not have anything to do with literacy. With the rise of the internet, text messaging, and social media, the language of written communication has become a part of our everyday communication. And due to the lack of facial cues and voice inflection, that language has evolved unwritten and unspoken rules to communicate tone in a medium. This can range from capitalization and punctuation to acronyms and use of emojis. It is also a fast-evolving linguistic phenomenon where people separated in age by less than a decade have overlapping but significantly different meanings attached to small choices such as ellipses or using a period at the end of your final sentence. And while these rules might seem arbitrary and insignificant to one set of people, the meaning they carry to the intended audience is as real and significant as small differences in spoken language, similar to direct translation from one language to another, losing meaning or taking on a new meaning entirely. Did my above paragraph read a little dry and stilted to you? I purposely used no contractions. Consider how saying it does not versus it doesn't or it is, instead of it's, shifts the tone slightly from friendly online stranger to dry professor lecture. Perfectly grammatically correct, but it reads a little different. That's what I mean, and your son gets it. He's surrounded by his peers and he fully understands, intuitively, if not cognitively, the language of Gen Alpha texting. He's making a choice. It's fine. His friends are going to rib him about it, but affectionately, it's his quirk, and that what it is, doesn't make him uncool. Story 11. Literacy isn't bound to grammar or certain modes of speech. Your question suggests his peers are illiterate, which isn't true by necessity if they are texting. You mean to ask, presumably, if using formal language is odd for texting. As almost everyone has noted, indeed it is. Please forgive any typographical or grammar errors, as I wrote this in my phone. Best regards. Story 12. There are all kinds of social indicators that people can use to judge a person's intention. Wearing a three-piece suit to a beach party? That says something. Maybe not anything coherent, but it says something. But normal speech being worth making fun of? If he were using a telegraph and taking 15 minutes to write a sentence because he refused to use normal abbreviations, that might make sense. But we're just talking about basic text messaging. So it's not a functional issue. It's not a practical communicative issue. It's just kids doing the typical stupid kid thing, ostracizing those who don't do the same stupid things. It's one thing to just not follow the crowd, but if by not following the crowd's stupidity is apparent, then they treat the one who won't conform as a pariah. I wish it was just kids who did this. Story 13. Perfect punctuation often lacks the correct emotional feel for the text. The syntax adds to the mood. I'm a cheeky one who will intentionally use yay instead of you in text at times as, I hope, my intentional butchering of the language conveys my lighthearted mood. I want it to sound a certain way in the recipient's head. How are you? What you doing? How you? It's not showing ineptitude. It's like art. Once you understand the fundamentals, you can warp the base words to your need by adding pronunciation through word alteration, and sometimes just butcher for fun. The YA is an upwards note. I find it much more cheerful than you, which has a much deeper sound and takes slightly longer to say. Ya is a chipper early morning you. Note, these examples are personal and some of these are likely only something I do, hence the personality. How are you doing? Polite and formal without emotion. How you, the sender is out of mental energy. How you doing? Casually saying hi, maybe say a few words. How you doing? Annoyingly saying hi may want more attention. What you doing? Playful intent. Likely going to ask for the recipient's attention for a while. Using perfect syntax is staying in realism in art and never exploring your own identity or creativity. The texts lack personality, and it can be harder to gauge intent from such writing. This can lead to misunderstandings or frustrations. Story 14. I gently tease my brother for something similar. He's autistic, and as long as we've had phones, he texts like a corporate email set in medieval times. Like, Dear sister, we are attempting to coordinate a family dinner with siblings AB, as well as parents. Please notify me at your earliest convenience the dates that work best with your schedule. Kind regards. My mom always kind of hated it. She's second language English, so sometimes she's just not sure what he wants. But I have received many a screenshot from my mom going, "What does this boy want?" And it's like, "Oh, he wants you to pick up some shampoo while you're out." It's always gentle teasing, but I will admit I have moments where I'm driving and the car reads texts for me and it's like, "MG, get to the point, PLS." Story 15. Realistically, different mediums have different assumptions. It would be atypical for a cartoon to have full paragraphs of text in chat bubbles for monologues. Likewise, it is atypical for a research paper to be full of slang/poor punctuation. It is a skill to adapt your use of language to the proper situations. Literacy is much more than simply being able to use formal language, but also mastering the informal expression while maintaining clarity of communication. Story 16, IMO. There's nothing wrong with that. But many younger people have started to use capitalization, punctuation, abbreviations, and other language modifications as a way to convey tone over text. For example, "Please call me," while a grammatically correct text conveys a semi-immediate, negatively charged tone through its formal format and the period at the end. "Hey, call me when you can," on the other hand, sounds a lot lighter and less urgent. My guess would be that it's not uncool that your son can write formally, but that the intended tone of his texts might not be clear to his peers. Story 17. When texting was invented and we all used T9, spelling everything out perfectly was a huge try-hard thing to do, or indicated you thought it was cool to be different, but put a lot of effort into doing so, which is kind of lame. Some exceptions, but that sort of built a common expectation that friendly texting is more casual than other writing. Using online short forms in chat rooms and such, then naturally carried over to texting because people weren't good at typing in general back then. Using more formal language than normalized in a social setting conveys that you aren't as close/comfortable with the people involved. It isn't always the case, but it's why people tend not to react positively to that kind of thing in general. Story 18. I'm always of the opinion that having one thing that people can gently tease you about is golden. It detracts from anything else that would be more devastating for a child's self-esteem. Mine was Mac Heath. Always is the first in the classroom, trying to butter up to the teacher, etc. Good. Good, because you're missing out on other opportunities to make fun of me for many other things. So rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, he uses proper punctuation, Own it, continue it, as all the kids look for something to tease at all times, and if that's what they fixate on, that's not horrific. I told my godson, you pick your one thing that you get teased about before someone comes up with something. Story 19. I'm 19, so I'd like to think I'm qualified to answer this. He's not uncool, and I've known plenty of people in high school that talk like this. I just turned auto-capitalization back on after years. It is kind of a litmus test on how casual someone is willing to be. For example, I send, "OMFG, look at this post I sent her." You can either send back, "Bah ha ha, I'm crying plaz," or "Ha ha, that's funny." One has way more imagery in it, LOL. It's also just a sign as to if they're up to date on slang and current internet fad stuff. If I'm sending my dumb texts and stuff and I get back proper paragraphs, I'm gonna feel underdressed for this event. Story 20. I generally write properly regardless of the context, though I did have to get creative back when SMSEs were actually short. I was picked on more for how the same trait manifested in speech than for messages, given one tends to message people they actually get along with. In my case, it just comes more naturally to me to write in actual words, given there are no character limits, and it takes the same or even less time to do. Who cares? You should be yourself and embrace your quirks. Being a phony just to fit in doesn't lead anywhere positive. Real friends will come along, and your son will learn what it feels like to be accepted and appreciated, without having to dumb himself down. Assuming his social skills are fine, the issue seems to me to be the others. Isn't this the era of being woke? In the end, it doesn't matter the decade we're in. The feeble egos will push others down to elevate themselves, and they love to prey on anyone who has an ounce of originality and owns it. Story 21. In my experience, it's never cool to be smarter than the people around you. I was mocked by my older sister's friends, called me that big word kid. Classmates would gang up and beat me up during recess, at least until I started fighting dirty in return. Encourage it though, please. Help him learn and discover knowledge. Tell him not to worry about the opinions of people who aren't genuinely kind to him. He sounds like the kind of kid who will teach himself way more than a teacher ever could if he's interested in something. Edit to add, I still do my best to use correct English even when texting or chatting in Discord groups, etc. For most of my life I thought I was stupid, But my wife made me take an IQ test. Turns out I'm smart enough. I'm just very slow when it comes to processing that I come across as dumb. As a kid, I was a lot faster at putting sentences together, so it wasn't as obvious. Story 22. I've always taught my son that using correct grammar is the best way to communicate, and that it shows he is intelligent and that he cares about what he is communicating. I also remind him often that it's important to know how to type correctly. I type for a living at my job, and he was always impressed at how fast I am. Well, now he's pretty fast himself, and this in combination with good grammar will serve him well and set him apart from others when he enters the job market. Being able to string together a coherent sentence, spelling words correctly, and being able to write a professional email will get you far in many aspects of day-to-day life, especially when you are having to correspond with anyone while looking for assistance in a personal or professional matter. It's a small but very important skill set that is often overlooked by a lot of people. Story 23. I lived in the USA for 3 years of my childhood and then went back to my third world country. This made me develop some formal mixed polite accent that I still have 14 years later. It's noticeable enough that many of my peers mocked me for it when I was growing up. Some told me to change my way of speaking and my manners to fit in better, but I didn't bother. I didn't see the need to change myself for people who made fun of me for either that or being the kid who they saw as weak for spending a few luxurious years in what they saw as a less harsh environment. Older people appreciated my qualities more. It's better to keep what I have anyway, as it would benefit me more in a professional setting later. Changing myself for unkind people is not something I saw as respectful for myself. Sadly, I spent a lot of life until now alone. I'm in college now and have some friends. The friends are nice, but I can feel similar behavior from either them or people in campus. I wonder how long it will stay this way. Story 24. This isn't a completely new phenomenon. Before texting was really popular, my own family would make jokes about how I was so prim and proper with my choice of words when speaking and how I wrote, emphasizing my use of grammar specifically. In today's world, I also have been subject to questioning as to why I use full sentences and punctuation in text messages by older stepchildren. This is a tactic used by those who value other things more, and sometimes unintentionally leaves one feeling like an outcast. I would not read too much into it, and would advise your son to stay true to what he is and believes is right. Story 25. I doubt that it's being literate is uncool. Every single one of these children could probably produce proper grammar and punctuation if they wanted to. It's probably just being different for no reason. In my experience, people who use punctuation and proper grammar in extremely informal situations, that is video game chats, instant messaging between friends, are kind of trying to subtly appear smarter, more posh, and just above other people, which can be viewed negatively for obvious reasons. Maybe that's not why your son is doing it. Maybe it seems normal to him for whatever reason, but it could probably be a lesson in conformity to him to what others find normal. Or maybe it could be his thing, source of inside jokes, bonding in friend groups, etc., depending on how seriously it is viewed by those who mock him according to you. Story 26. It's got nothing to do with literacy. Wearing a three-piece suit to a cookout is an equal faux pas to wearing shorts and a tank top to job interview. Someone who can't code switch is just as ignorant as someone who doesn't know the difference between your and your. The real difference is there's no spell check equivalent for not being able to read a room. Please make sure your son's social development isn't damaged just because you like bragging about how literate he is while he alienates his peers. Like, do you want bragging rights with your mommy friends, or do you want to raise a functional adult? Teach him how to code switch, or prepare to spend many nights listening to him cry himself to sleep. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.